Are you supervising? Is everything okay? And to your liking, sir? Yeah? It's great. Okay. In today's video, we're talking about my Ikea cabinet that I converted into a mini greenhouse. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I was just cleaning my Ikea cabinet, which was way overdue. So I thought I'd use the opportunity of it being empty to, well, show you the setup and then also show you the plants that I'm growing in there at the moment. Alrighty, I hope the lighting is okay. I know this light in here is pretty bright, so I hope you can still see me okay. But I wanted to show you what it actually looks like. So, this is my Ikea cabinet. It's a Milsbo cabinet and I set it up just over 2.5 years ago. So I have quite a bit of experience growing with my cabinet. And I have to say, most of the setup didn't really change from the initial setup. Now, let me take you a bit closer so I can show you the actual setup of things. All right, let's start from the top. So over here, I've got a grow light. It's from a company called Mars Hydro. I think it's called TS60. And I've had it since day dot and it's going really, really well. The only thing that I don't necessarily love about it is that it can't be dimmed. So I need to install a little shade cover, but we talk about that in a sec. Secondly, I've got a fan over here and the fan is just a desk fan and I spray painted it black. It's from Amazon and I've just got that suspended over here with a suction cup, and that fan has been on for 3 years, 24/7, and is still going strong. So happy days. Of course, I had to drill a hole in the bottom for all of the cables. And then at the back, let me put you down. But the back, the panel over here, that's the only thing that changed over time. So when I initially set it up, I had the Ikea pegboard in here, but the Ikea pegboard is made from recycled wood. So that was molding really, really quickly within just a couple of months because it's a really high humidity environment in here. Obviously, I don't want to have mold growing in there, so I had to replace it. I found this metal grid at Bunnings, and the metal grid is held in here by these brackets. So this bracket in the back, and sorry, it's kind of a bit, it has suffered over the last 3 years a little bit, so it's a bit rusty and a bit of the paint has chipped. I spray painted them black as well. But these brackets came with the Ikea pegboard, so you normally mount the Ikea pegboard on those two sides. I just drilled a hole in the middle and then I used a screw to connect it to these holes over here. These holes are usually holding these little stoppers that the shelves sit on. So I have one over here, I have a second of the brackets over here, but I kind of made it upright so it's in line with that back panel, so it's looking even less impactful. And this is just hanging off here with a piece of wire, a cable tie over here, and these are cable tied on here as well. I then also cable tied the cables for the light as well as the fan to the side of it, feeding it into the hole down there. I really wanted to have a vertical setup, so I didn't want to have shelves in there because with every shelf you're creating a new environment, and for every environment you kind of need to have a fan to make sure that there's sufficient airflow. So I wanted this to be one space so that my one fan that I've got in here can kind of produce airflow for the entire cabinet. And if you have horizontal shelves, obviously if you have a grow light here and then you have a shelf here and you put plants on it, they will shade the shelf below. So then you might also need 2 or 3 grow lights and so on. So I feel like with that vertical setup, using the back panel, I just need 1 grow light, 1 fan, and then obviously at the top you get more light and then at the bottom you get more filtered light. So I'll just choose the plants according to that. But I'm really loving the setup as it is and it's worked really well for me. Now, I can't really recommend you buy the pegboard just so you got the bracket so you can then buy something else to mount on top of it. I mean, but really the key outcome here is just that I just got creative. I just looked at the problem and I just kind of found some sort of solution. That's probably not the best solution. There's many ways you could do that. But if you want to build a vertical setup like that, make sure that you're using a metal grid and not wood. So the grow light is on for 12 hours a day. It turns on at 7 a.m. and turns off at 7 p.m. and the fan is on 24/7. I've got them connected to like a smart plug where I can then just set the schedule. And I just got the smart plug from Bunnings, of course. All right, so that is the initial setup. The only other thing I need to do is I need to be able to dim the light a little bit. And the light in itself isn't dimmable, so if you have a light that can be dimmed, that would be ideal. So I want to install a little shade cover. Now previously I just did my own shade cover with it was just a coat hanger and a piece of cloth on top. So it was very makeshift, very basic, but it lasted for over 2 years. And it worked perfectly fine, it just didn't look the nicest. And if you watched the video where I was at the plant collectors fair, or collectors plant fair, you might have seen that there was a really lovely couple that gave me a frame. So they modeled their Ikea cabinet after mine, but they came up with a much better idea for the shade cover at the top. So they actually just used a frame, they spray painted that black as well, and they put shade cover in between where usually the picture would go. So it is a much more elegant solution. Now for me to mount this, I came up with the idea of just getting these like L brackets and just have a cable tie at the frame, and then I can just slide this in here and I can slide these things into the grid. So I can easily take it out anytime I need to. So I'm just gonna put this here, I think. Like this, I think. Let's have a look. So I just hook this in here and in here, and then it's kind of covering the whole thing like that. I think that looks much more professional. It's obviously much darker now as well. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but it's shading the light quite well. Maybe a little bit too much, but we'll find out. If the plants in here aren't growing, then it's probably too much shade. But sometimes too much light also doesn't necessarily bring out the best in plants. Actually, my El Choco, for example, has a little bit of sun stress from being in the cabinet, so it's probably a good idea to go a little bit, to go one up on the shade. So that's it. Oh, I do also have a little thermometer in here. Obviously right now it has gone down in humidity a little bit because I've got the door open, but it is usually over 90% humidity in here, and the temperatures usually go between like 20 and 25. Depending on how warm it is inside actually in the first place. Now to get to such high humidity, I have insulated the cabinet. So the doors have like a foam insulation on here. The only bit that I left open is the actual door over here. So there's a tiny gap over here, but that's okay because I do want some fresh air to actually come in. But it's not enough to actually reduce the humidity in there. But because of the high humidity, it's so important that we have the fan, because otherwise there would just be way too much condensation in there. Water would accumulate on the leaves, and then you will most likely, pretty sure you will end up having some sort of fungal issues. So airflow is really important and also builds a stronger, more resilient plant in the first place. Keep in mind, like in nature, these plants would grow in tropical rainforest conditions. There's usually a bit of wind or airflow, and there's usually really high humidity. Alrighty, so that's really it about the setup of the cabinet in itself. Now we got to fill it with plants, right? And they're all sitting on my kitchen counter, ready to be watered in a sec, or ready to be assessed if they need watering. At the moment, it's quite cold and winterish over here, so obviously the cabinet would be the least impacted by the outside conditions because it's its own little microclimate, but I don't actually heat it apart from the heat that is produced by the light. So if it's colder outside and in my apartment, and obviously it's going to be colder in there as well. In summer, I can easily go up to being 28, 29, 30 degrees in there. Still really high humidity and great airflow and obviously great light. So in summer, the plants are growing a little faster in there. In winter, they definitely slow down a little bit, but they're still growing much faster than any of the plants outside because I'm providing them with the perfect conditions in here and the perfect consistent conditions on top of that. Keep in mind, the conditions always set the potential of the plant, and then my care approach is really just realizing the potential. So with great conditions like that, I can experiment a little better in this Ikea cabinet because the conditions are so great that kind of like the plant has an easy time surviving in the first place. So if I want to try a new medium, or if I propagated a plant, or I'm growing my El Choco without a pot, for example, if I put them in an environment that has perfect conditions, my experiments are more likely to be successful. Or I can experiment with my care approach a little more and really assess differences and so on without the plant struggling all too much. All right, anyway, enough talk. Let's have a look at the plants that are in there and assess whether they need watering. I was actually starting this whole conversation because I wanted to let you know that I usually water it once a week, but in winter I might need to water that less often, specifically because it's really high humidity in there as well. So because it's high humidity, things just don't really dry out as quickly. But let's assess the plants. Alrighty. Usually I water them outside, but it's kind of cold today. I can't be asked to go outside, so I'm gonna do it in here over my sink. First things first, we've got the queen. She is definitely the biggest plant in my cabinet. And I only recently, like maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, potted her in tree fern fiber, and have a look at that. Is it gonna focus? There you go. Already roots showing, pushing towards the edge of the pod. So she's happy. And I know that because, oh my gosh, it's heavy. She's also pushing out a new leaf over here. So this leaf has only unfurled since the repot, and it's looking really healthy, and it's going to be quite large. So anthurium leaves come out really small, and then they inflate quite a bit. Now, based on the condensation in this pod, I don't really need to water this plant. So I'll keep her aside. All right, next one, we've got my Chironii. Just pushed out a new leaf. So based on it growing a new leaf, I'm expecting it to use a little bit more water. And it's also an experiment. I'm growing this in tree fern fiber at the moment. You can see still some water in here, but lots of roots have pushed towards the edge of the pot already. So it's really, really happy in tree fern fiber. It feels light though. So even though I can see condensation, the pot feels really light. So I'm gonna water it. I get a bucket just to catch any excess that drains through because, sorry, that's loud. Because I put my GT Foliage Focus fertilizer in the water, so I don't want it to go down the drain and go to waste. I'm gonna catch the water and then I will feed my plants outside with it. All right, we've got a little is it Clinovium, just a single cutting at the moment. Ooh, some chunky roots pushing to the side of the pot. Oh, look at that, beautiful. Oh my God, it's coming out over here. So this one, I can't see much condensation and it feels quite light. Water. Next one, we've got a Rugosum pushing out a new leaf, and look at that amazing texture. Same over here, potted that in tree fern fiber 2-3 weeks ago. You can still see some condensation, you can see some roots pushing towards this outside, but given it has a new leaf, it will have increased water requirements, and I can tell by the weight of the pot, it needs some water. Alrighty, over here we've got my Philodendron Wernerii, and you can tell that this has also a little bit of sun stress, so I think it was a good idea to have a stronger shade cover now. This is also on a tree fern fiber pole, and you can see some nice roots on the back of the pole. If it's not too glary, beautiful. You can also see that this is sufficiently moist, a lot of condensation, and it still feels quite heavy. What I've done over here, sometime last week as well, I actually cut the stem here and here. So there's 3 pieces on this pole now, so it can propagate itself. And then I'll pop all 3 pieces on a larger one. Small little anthurium seedling. That was one of my own hybrids that I made with a friend. So I think it was my queen with his magnificum. So let's see what that turns out. Still in a tiny seedling pot filled with moss. There's actually roots coming out the bottom, so I should probably repot this. But not today. And my newest addition is teeny tiny philodendron, Florida Beauty. This is the first leaf it has unfurled, so I think it recovered from the shock. We'll see. Yeah. While we're here, let's maybe talk about the clips. So when I first got my Ikea greenhouse, I was using the pegboard, and the pegboard came with these clips. These are spray painted black, that's why they look so terrible. Originally they come in white, but I wanted everything black at the beginning, but now I can't really be asked anymore. Anyway, surprisingly, this little thing where you're supposed to snip it into the pegboard fits perfectly on that new metal grid that I installed. So I can still use them, which is great because I have a lot of them. And they are really strong. Ow. Sorry. They're actually really, really strong. I did not expect them to be that strong, but I mean, this pot is tiny. Look at this, for example. It holds the pot, the pole, and the plant all by just this one clip. I didn't do anything. The pole is not even cable tied to the pot. It just held it's all held together just by this one clip. This is my variegated Adansonii. Yeah, let's not talk about it. That pisses me off, this plant. Alrighty, down here we've got some seedlings, alocasia seedlings. Actually, nice story. It used to be my alocasia. When I moved out of my house into my old apartment, I had to get rid of all of my alocasias because they're just too big. I gave them to my friend Tim. He put them in his garden, and one of them grew massive and just started pushing out seeds. So I got some of the seeds and I'm germinating them now to put them in my garden. So happy days. That's just in tree fern fiber and perlite, and it's sitting at the bottom of my cabinet. So actually getting the least light, but it's happy. This is another one of the same hybrid, the Queen and Magnificum. This one is just in a different pot, which probably has decent roots. So this should also probably be potted up properly, but later. And over here we've got a tiny little variegated Magnificum that used to be quite large, and then I took it out of the cabinet because it outgrew it and it just melted. So it was not happy. When the leaves come through, it first comes through with you can't really see the variegation, and then as it kind of inflates, then you might see some variegation. I insert some photos of when this plant was bigger. I'm just really, really desperate to grow it back to its thriving nature because it was so beautiful. But yeah, I had to re-root it all. It was kind of just really unhappy. So I'm happy to see that there's some new roots pushing towards the outside of the pot. Happy days. It feels really heavy, and I can see some condensation, so I'm not going to water this, and the moss is still moist on top. And then here, I should have probably showed you those at the same time as I showed you the queen, but when I chopped my queen, I put all of my propagations in here. So I've got 2, actually I've got 1 in my room as well. I just wanted to see the difference. They're definitely doing much better in the cabinet than in the room. They're also in tree fern fiber, perlite and sand. And new shoot coming here. And I'm not surprised by that because all of these cuttings were already really, really thoroughly rooted based on the queen growing on a pole in the first place. So 2 new shoots here as well. So this is double planted. Yeah, happy days. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link it at the end screen where I give my queen a nice chop. Alright, some more seedlings, and these have just been at the bottom of the cabinet as well. I didn't have given them. They are I don't even know how to pronounce this. Ocrant. Yeah, this one. And you can see that these seeds are over a year old already, but because oh no, hang on, this is September. Is this September or I can't even. This is September, so they're not a year old just yet, but yeah, they haven't grown that much because I think I'm not giving them as much light as they might like. But because I don't really know what they're going to grow into, I'm not really giving them a prime spot. They came complimentary with another plant purchase that I had, so yeah. All right, we've got a variegated burler marks. It's not wanting to focus here. Variegated burler marks over here. Very, very well rooted. So I should probably pot this up today. And we've got my El Choco, my favorite at the moment. It's my absolute obsession. If you haven't seen the video of me potting it up, I'm actually growing it without a pot. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an extra shoot. 4 shoots on here. This was such a success story. I absolutely love this plant. And you can see how there's so many roots going into the pole already. Like from all sides, there's just roots going wild. Now I told you before that it was a bit sun stressed. Have a look at this leaf over here. That is sun stress. It was just getting too much light, so I moved it a little bit lower in the cabinet. But now that I've bumped up the shade cover, I might be able to put it up higher a little bit more again. Most beautiful leaf after I put it a little lower, and new leaf coming out here. So it has not skipped a beat since I gave it a chop. I mean, look how I just don't know how you could possibly beat this plant at the moment. It's my absolute favorite. And then look at the back. The red and even, yeah. And the petiole. Oh my God, this is... Okay, so over here I just need to feel the moss. The moss still feels moist as well, so I'm not gonna water this. Third time's the charm. I'm trying to grow a variegated Adansonii again, and I'm feeling helpful. That newest leaf that's coming out here seems to be kind of half-half. I don't know why it's just not focusing today. So I want to pot this up because there's some nice aerial roots coming here, and I want to make sure they have a pole to attach to. So let's have a look. I only got this plant last week, and I didn't want to repot it straight away. Okay, it has some roots, and they came off really easily. I'm not going to disturb it anymore. There was nothing wrong in itself with the potting medium. I just didn't like the pot it was in because I want to be able to spy on it instead. So I can reuse this potting mix somewhere outside. I won't use it inside, just in case. And I want to mount this on here, making sure that these new aerial roots make contact with the moss pole. So use my trusted U-shaped pieces of wire, pin them into here. That's it, done. I'll take this, put it in here, and fill it up with air mix. Ta-da! Now, next step is I'm going to take a little more of the wire. I'm going to build a little hook up here. Now you can also totally cable tie your pot to the pole and so on, but I just never do. I'll just let the chunky aeroid mix kind of lock it in place, and then eventually once the plant grows roots, the roots will really hold it all together quite nicely. But I love to live on the edge, you know. Nothing I recommend. Better safe than sorry, so please secure your poles to the pot. Don't follow my bad example. All right, let's water that as well. Alrighty, so I'll start popping some plants back in here. Now the arrangement within here, so whereabouts in the cabinet they are, really depends on a couple of things. Well, first of all, the size of the plant. So the queen, for example, is just too big. I can't hang her here. She's just gonna crowd everything, and also she's too heavy. The other thing that it depends on is their tolerance to light, but also kind of, you know, if they're teeny tiny, if I put them all the way down at the bottom, they're not gonna get any of the light. Now that I've got the new shade cover, even the very top should be okay for all of these seedlings. And sometimes, like, it sounds weird, but sometimes like sun stressing them is not necessarily a bad thing. The leaves that they grow in the moment might be a little sun stressed and damaged, but it's allowing the plant to grow really fast. And ultimately leaves will come and go anyway. They will never stay there forever, right? So because they grow really fast though, they establish quite quickly. And when I then move them into a position where they're less sun stressed, they just skyrocket. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I found that sometimes sun stressing them a little isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it keeps changing. I don't always have the exact same setup. You know, sometimes they move around a little bit. It's okay. God, I forgot how many I have. Alright, and I've got this new plant. Got these magnetic hooks, so they're really strong magnets, but you can also clip them. Alright, so here it is. We've got the smaller plants on top, and as I said, all of these clips just slide into the back very easily. And then we've got all of the moss poles in there. The Alchoco on the left, the Adensonii on the right, and then at the very back we've got the queen and then a few seedlings at the bottom over there. So as a last thing, I turned on the fan. I only had it turned off because of the noise. Ta-da! Alrighty, I think it's time to call it a day. I hope you found some inspiration in my setup and maybe you're inspired to build one of these cabinets yourself. I'll link all of the materials or products that I'm using in here down below so you can go and check them out. But I'd also encourage you to just try and be creative. If you're facing a specific issue, just try and find a creative solution for it. That's what I've done, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my solution is the best. I'm sure somebody can come up with a better option or a better solution like my friends did with the frame. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe and leave a nice comment and I'll see you next time. Bye. What are you doing there? Mwah.